What is up, Netflix fans? Welcome back to my channel. You have clicked on a spoiler-free review of the brand new Netflix show that is Dahmer. I'm going to give you my overall thoughts and tell you whether or not I believe this series worked, but this video doesn't work unless you leave your comments down below. How'd you feel about this show? Did it work for you? And let's get into the description. So, Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer Story, that's the alternative title, takes place between 1978 and 1991, where Jeffrey Dahmer gruesomely took the lives of 17 innocent victims. Dahmer is a series that exposes these crimes centered around the underserved victims and their communities impacted by the systemic racism and institutional failures of the police that allowed one of America's most notorious serial killers to continue his murderous spree in plain sight for over a decade. This comes to us from co-creators or executive producers Ryan Murphy and Ian Brennan. And we have Evan Peters, one of my favorites, in the lead role playing Jeffrey Dahmer. This is, of course, rated TV mature for substances, language, violence, nudity, gore, sexual violence, and smoking. It's definitely not one you want to watch with the family. Ryan Murphy, a massive name in the industry. Most people will recognize the shows like Glee and American Horror Story, but these Netflix projects, it feels like we get 2 or 3 per year with Murphy's name attached. Not only television shows, but movies. And for the most part, I've enjoyed them, but I've been really up and down on these projects over the years. Some I will really enjoy, and then we'll get the next one. I'm kind of like, oh, okay, well. And it feels like the ones that I dislike always get off to a really nice start, but then they kind of just, they end up going all over the place. And that was what I was hoping Dahmer would refrain from doing. And in the first episode of this show being the strong beginning, the strong introduction to the version of this character that we get in this series, that it is, I was hoping for the best. I was crossing my fingers because this series does something that I didn't expect. It kind of started where we're about to wrap up. It gave us the end, and we know where it ends. It's based on a true story before we saw the beginning. And the episodes to follow started to go deep into Dahmer's backstory, whether it be in high school, going through college, going into the military, and every single place Dahmer ends up. And he says this himself multiple times. It feels like he just doesn't quite belong, and he sees himself as a failure. His father also sees him as a failure. Why? Well, I mean, technically, every place he ends up, he either flunks out, drops out, gets himself into trouble, and it's this buildup of so many different things that we are able to see. Now, with that comes the hesitation of like, oh, are they going to try to make Jeffrey Dahmer seem like the good guy? Because the actions, especially the actions that we see and know in the first episode, and obviously based on real life, that should not be the case. I was hoping that wouldn't be the case, but thankfully, I feel as if this show, while walking a very fine line between building him up to make him feel relatable, but also showing us and allowing us to know that this is not a person we are supposed to root for, thankfully, it does feel as if they're doing a nice job of making us despise this character, but understanding that his life was not one that was kind to him, but most of this comes from how he sees himself, how he looks at himself in the mirror and understands that something is not quite right. And I think everything that I just said is conveyed to us brilliantly by Evan Peters. It's the face for me. Evan Peters is walking around as Jeffrey Dahmer, and it's this blank stare, and you understand that something is missing. There's a screw loose somewhere, but it's conveyed to us to where it almost feels as if there is nothing going on, even though you know there is something going on in here. And Evan Peters does a brilliant job of showcasing that, but also, making you see and feel his anger, his rage, but knowing that it comes from the wrong place entirely. Man, oh man, I thought he did an awesome job. It's an incredible performance. It really is. Making comparisons to other performances, it's not even fair because this show is given to us in such a different context. And I mentioned, going back, starting in episode 2, looking at Dahmer's past, but this show being told out of order, but it's not even being told through flashbacks. We're just going to different points in his life and trying to dig deep into the mentality and where a lot of these murders spawn from. Watching this show from that perspective makes it feel less like a Ryan Murphy series and more like a mind hunter, which is one of my favorite Netflix shows of all time, David Fincher, and this is not that. The filmmaking may not be on that level, but it did approach it from a darker place, which I think is the right tone, it's the right vibe to give off while watching a show based around Jeffrey Dahmer, and I think that was captured. So I was enthralled, I was engaged, I was disgusted at times because the actions are disgusting. Thankfully, the show lets you know how disgusting they are, but it also focuses on how wrong he actually was to do this and who he is targeting, the community that is targeted by Dahmer, and the fact that it was ignored by so many people, by so many encounters that he had, to where they'll see something, it looks like it's really wrong, and everyone there kind of realizes how wrong it is. The police come in, and nothing is done about it. A lot of things just shoot off, ignored, and frankly, this aspect of the show is just as difficult to watch because of these focused and targeted, extremely racist attacks. I love seeing the perspective of some people that saw what went down, that were somewhat in the vicinity of the attacks. Karen Molina White plays Shirley Hughes. I thought this was a great character, a great perspective, and it's sad to see and hear how people were straight up ignored in this time period, and they definitely put that on display, so hard to watch. There was a lot of tension between he and his father, and I think his father served a huge purpose in this show, as did his mother, but who better to get to play his father than Richard Jenkins? Oh my God, Richard Jenkins crushes it because he continues to see the problems that spark from his son. He's doing whatever it takes, right? Getting him into college, understanding that he needs to join the army, and he's trying his best to push him in the right direction, but there's only so much you can do for someone like this, and none of it seems to work as we go. And you feel that emotion. You understand that there are things that are going to happen that are going to make you feel uncomfortable. I think that's the word here. This is a series that makes me feel uncomfortable every single episode, whether it be the imagery that is shown there in high school dissecting an animal. We'll continue to cut back to those images, and some of it, to be honest, was too much because you think of the atrocities that actually happen, and they're heartbreaking, they're gut-wrenching, but they are effective, and this series was effective in displaying that, giving us a great lead performance. At times, I felt as if the pacing was a bit of a struggle to get through. I didn't entirely love that we would spend so much time on a certain part of his life and not move on to the next thing a bit quicker. I did feel that in a few episodes, especially in the middle portion of the show, and most of that comes from the fact that we started with the result of what happened. The rest of it is giving us insight into his mentality. Maybe they were just trying to dive too deep into that. I just wasn't feeling the moments that we were getting, and not that I wanted to see more of that gruesomeness, but I just wanted to understand more of what was coming from in here. So that was probably my biggest issue with the show, and then just walking that fine line. There may have been times where they occasionally tiptoed into moments that felt a bit too much for me, and a lot of that is, I say the Ryan Murphy isms, to where they'll give us these things that feel a bit outlandish and maybe not as realistic, or trying to shoehorn something in there that doesn't quite fit. There's less of that in this show for sure. I think the focus is where it needs to be. So before I give you all my score for this show, let me know down below, did this make your skin crawl as much as it did mine? Did it make you feel uncomfortable? Did you enjoy the experience? And if you enjoyed this video, you want to drop a like, that'd be cool. So Dahmer is able to effectively build tension while balancing the morality displayed by our main character. Peters delivers a haunting performance, and the series never wears out its welcome, even though it is one uncomfortable watch. My score is an 82%. I think this is one of the better Ryan Murphy shows on Netflix I've seen in quite a while. Most of it is due to a handful, numerous elevated performances, and a couple that I didn't even talk about. But let me know your thoughts down below. Come back for more. We'll have more reviews on this channel very soon.